Skeletons and horses. We live with history surrounding us. Prehistoric humans walked where we live, and every so often, their remains show up for archaeologists to prove it. In Russia, a farmer discovered the remains of 3 ancient people that lived in a nomadic tribe over 2,500 years ago. Not only that, but he also discovered a mysterious horse skull and harness buried alongside one of the tribesmen. It looks like they rode on horseback all those years ago. These people were part of a group known as the Sarmatians, and they lived in a small village northwest of the Caspian Sea. Each skeleton was found inside of its own wooden coffin, though unfortunately the grave sites have already been pillaged. This means that whatever ancient items that had been buried with the corpses, like weapons or jewelry, were already long gone before the farmer ever showed up. According to Live Science, the Sarmatians flourished in Russia before eventually migrating west into Europe while struggling to stay alive because of fighting with other powerful groups of the time, such as the Scythians and Goths. Evacuation of the burial grounds where these people were found is still ongoing. Archaeologists are still working to uncover the genders and ages of the deceased individuals, with hopes of attaining a better understanding of these mysterious nomads and their way of life. The Viking helmet. The Viking helmets found at Vendel, one of the most impressive archaeological sites in all of Sweden, are nothing short of incredible. Researchers first uncovered these incredible historical artifacts back in 1929, and since then they've found priceless treasures there from back during the Dark Ages. The burial grounds where these helmets were uncovered were used from between 550 and 800 AD. This period is also known as the Vendel period. We only know about it because of written accounts by other people in Europe, seeing as the Vikings didn't leave any written records of their own. They were more focused on pillaging and killing others than on writing down stories of their exploits. Fortunately for us, some of the people that they invaded did take notes. The only things the Vikings themselves left behind, though, were artifacts being buried deep inside of graves, waiting to be excavated by archaeologists. The Vendel helmets were almost certainly made in Scandinavia, though historians still aren't sure how they became so popular with the Vikings. They might have been inspired by Roman helmets used in the later part of the Roman Empire, and some suggest the Vikings may have been particularly inspired by the gladiatorial helmets. But today, the collection of well-preserved Vendel artifacts, helmets included, can be seen on display in Sweden, and sometimes in special exhibitions around the world. What would you do if you lived in a village being invaded by the Vikings? Would you fight back or just hope that they were merciful invaders? Let me know down in the comments. Roman eunuch. In an absolutely bizarre discovery out of North Yorkshire in the United Kingdom, archaeologists dug up the ancient remains of a eunuch who had once been part of the Roman population. The eunuch was discovered bedazzled with jewelry, buried in what experts believe is women's clothing, and completely castrated, probably by himself during an excruciating religious ceremony. The dig came about because of a bypass that was being constructed to serve as a link between London and Hadrian's Wall. Archaeologists found elaborate paintings, an ancient Roman motel, and of course the strange eunuch priest. He was buried with 2 pebbles stuffed in his mouth, something done by members of the cult of Cybele. The stones were symbolic, a hope that in death he would have the manhood that he robbed from himself given back. But here's what's so crazy about the discovery. His body proved that there were many mystical religions from the Far East active in Roman Britain during the 4th century. This is solidified by other bizarre finds, such as a castration clamp that was recently pulled out of the Thames River. To date, the eunuch priest is the only man who's ever been found wearing such an array of jewelry in Britain. And why he decided to snip himself for his cult is because the devotees to Cybele wanted to model themselves after the lover of their goddess, Attis, who himself became a eunuch as a self-punishment for having an affair. Man-eating pets. A team of archaeologists working at Teotihuacan in Mexico uncovered a strange burial ground containing 194 bones. But these weren't human bones. Instead, they belonged to animals that had been sacrificed and put inside of the ancient pyramids between 1 and 550 AD. That's right, these animals got their own magnificent graves, which is more than can be said for many humans who lived at the time. The archaeologists found proof of wild animal captivity dating back 2,000 years, including animals like jaguars, pumas, foxes, eagles, and even rattlesnakes. These animals were used in religious ceremonies, which were often bloody and violent to the point that the people today would be disgusted. It's believed that the Aztecs actually raised the animals strictly for the purpose of sacrificing them during important occasions. But here's the mysterious part. Researchers did chemical analysis of the animal bones and teeth. What they found was that the carnivores contained high amounts of C4, which is a special variant of carbon which indicates that they had a high concentration of maize in their diets. But this wasn't something a carnivore would eat. Instead, it was something that the Mesoamericans ate. What could that mean? The jaguars weren't eating corn. The consensus is that those early humans living at Teotihuacan, which back then was one of the largest cities on the planet, were feeding humans to their pet jaguars. What's not clear is why humans would have been fed to animals that were being sacrificed. Surely they could have fed the big cats something other than human beings. Maybe the poor souls were vanquished enemy soldiers? Researchers simply don't know the answers to these morbid questions. What do you think? The Pit of Death. In Russia, a series of terrifying death pits containing at least 300 bodies have been discovered. The disturbing site was found in the old city of Yaroslavl. Archaeologists are saying the death pits probably date back to when the Mongols invaded Europe in the year 1238. This was a time when Genghis Khan's grandson, Batu Khan, was destroying entire communities and burning them to the ground. DNA evidence uncovered from bodies inside the death pits have shown that some of the victims were related. Experts from Russia's own Institute of Archaeology have now painted a picture as to why the people were dumped into the graves and who exactly they were. We have to go back to the birth of Yaroslavl. It was founded between 998 and 1010 during the rule of Yaroslavl the Wise. Mongol troops attacked the city in 1257 and murdered quite a lot of people. Imagine being in a city getting invaded by the Mongols. You'd probably curl up into a ball and cry. The idea of a Mongol invasion goes directly against some scholars, who have argued that Mongols' Golden Horde acquired its Russian territory peacefully. The Mongols clearly didn't. They definitely slaughtered people in the hundreds and then dumped them into death pits. Judging by the brutality inflicted on these people, clearly seen by archaeologists when inspecting the bones, the attack on the city was brutal and ruthless, and literally ended in the city drowning in blood. Creepy bug fossil. The creepiest fossil in the world was just found in Scotland. The fossil is that of a millipede, which, according to the study done by members of the University of Texas, may be the oldest bug in the entire world. The millipede dates back 425 million years and is older than any other fossil discovered of any other insect, creepy crawly, or arachnid. It's about 75 million years younger than any other millipede found. And while researchers admit there could be older fossils of bugs out there, they have not found them yet. Thanks to this fossil, scientists have concluded that bugs likely evolved much more quickly than previously thought. They now believe that insects went from hanging around lakes and shorelines to occupying forests and creating complex ecosystems of their own in only 40 million years. Researchers say that there was a rapid evolution that began at the water's edge, spread to nearby areas, and soon went worldwide. And it may have started with this tiny, seemingly insignificant, and undoubtedly creepy millipede. The thing is that scientists have found other bug deposits dating just 20 million years after the millipede. But add another 20 million years onto that, and scientists have found evidence of forests ripe with a multitude of bizarre insects and spiders. But what happened between the emergence of the millipede and the establishment of forest ecosystems is still an utter mystery. Royal inscription. In western Iran, archaeologists recently found part of a royal inscription that has been attributed to Neo-Assyrian king Sargon II, and it's opened up a whole new set of mysteries about this strange ruler and what he was up to over 2,500 years ago. The excavation took place at Kabakh Tepe, which was once a very important settlement in ancient times, but is now a tiny village with lots of archaeological treasures underground, waiting to be uncovered. What researchers do know is this: King Sargon II ruled from 721 to 705 BCE. He ruled at a time when chieftainships of southern Babylonia were rising up, when the kingdom of Urartu was coming into power, and when the Assyrians were trying to conquer Syria and Palestine. He probably dealt with a lot of conflict both inside his kingdom and with foreign enemies. But not much is known for sure about King Sargon's short reign. This small block of stone with 23 lines of writing on it is the most significant discovery pertaining to his life. We know he wanted to expand and conquer to show the world the might of Ashur, the national god of Assyria, but other than some fascinating ancient carvings and just a few words etched into stone, King Sargon is a mystery. Ancient rock art. Archaeologists in France discovered what they believe could be the oldest rock art in Europe ever. It was found in 2012 when the archaeologists were investigating an ancient rock shelter. They turned over a broken slab of limestone and came face to face with a piece of rock that had been etched with pictures of aurochs. What's so exciting about this is that aurochs have been extinct for a very long time, but were hunted across much of Europe by our earliest ancestors thousands and thousands of years ago. Radiocarbon dating placed the engraved piece of rock at being 38,000 years old. This was a time even before the ending of the last ice age, when all kinds of amazing beasts roamed Europe. According to anthropologist Randall White from New York University, this was a time when humans had just begun to start to spread across the continent. Hunter-gatherers would have hibernated inside of the rock shelter where the artwork was found, keeping warm through the winter. One winter, 38,000 years ago, an unknown caveman became one of the first artists in existence. Ancient Chinese tombs. Tombs have been uncovered in ancient China that are beyond creepy. About 500 artifacts have been saved from the ancient tombs, all of which date back about 2,700 years before today. The tombs were found in the Shanxi province, containing many amazing cultural relics built from a variety of materials, such as jade, copper, gold, and bamboo. There were 9 tombs discovered, all of which were about medium-sized. Many of the bronze wares that were found, things like pots and bowls, still had legible inscriptions on them in ancient Chinese characters. One of the oddest discoveries came in the form of cat paws. The archaeologists apparently found strange golden ornaments shaped like cat paws, and nobody really knows what they were used for. But who did these creepy tombs belong to? They were created to be the eternal resting place of nobles who lived during what is now known as the Spring and Autumn period of China, between 770 and 476 BCE. However, archaeologists did not divulge whether they had actually discovered any bodies. Right now, it's believed that the tombs were already pillaged by grave robbers by the time archaeologists got there, meaning no bones and no bodies. Too many mammoth bones. In Mexico City, the construction site of a new airport yielded some very surprising discoveries. In October of 2019, hundreds of fossils began to appear in the excavations being made for the airport. According to archaeologist Pedro Sanchez Nava, there were actually too many fossils. Scientists have uncovered over 2,000 bones, all of them belonging to mammoths. And other than the mystery of why so many mammoths were all discovered in the same place, researchers are struggling to solve the mystery of what they're going to do with so many bones. This has been labeled the largest mammoth discovery in human history. The operation is so big that it is still under the supervision of the army in Mexico. Normally, the bones would be kept on site, but the government wanted to move forward with the airport with the team of archaeologists under a confidentiality agreement. Nobody knows what is going to happen to the mammoth bones or where they're all being taken. They could end up in a storage facility somewhere for all we know, piled up like a bunch of loose garbage. Ancient Baltic Sea ship. Divers from Finland have discovered a ship in the depths of the Baltic Sea that dates back to 400 years. This amazing discovery is shedding light on the boating history of the 17th century. The boat is an example of a Dutch vloot, a kind of ship that was used in trading in the 1600s. In fact, the vloot is one of the first boats made specifically for cargo. It was found at the mouth of the Gulf of Finland in exceptional condition. The Baltic Sea is actually one of the best places to find wooden ships because of the freezing temperatures. Microorganisms have a hard time flourishing in the Baltic Sea, meaning wooden ships can last much longer without being broken down. The area was important for trade 400 years ago. Some of the ships sailing through the Baltic Sea were the first in what would become a network of globalized trade. This particular ship was found roughly 300 feet deep and had not sustained much damage. Nobody's really sure why it sank, and nobody knows what the name of the ancient Scandinavian vessel is. But researchers are hoping to discover more about the original cargo ship's design and why it went out of style by the 18th century. Chan Chan statues. The Chan Chan statues are some of the strangest things ever excavated in Peru. They were found at the largest pre-Columbian site anywhere in the Americas, the Chan Chan Archaeological Site. This place was once the capital of the legendary Chamu Kingdom, which actually came before the powerful Inca Empire. The ancient city, known as Trujillo, thrived as a budding metropolis between the years 900 and 1450, far from the altitude of the Andes Mountains, near the northernmost coast of Peru. But what about these statues? About 20 of them were found by Patricia Balbueno and her team of archaeologists. They were found literally buried in soil at the entrance of one of the largest temple complexes in the ancient city. They were once part of a corridor leading to a ceremonial courtyard. The statues were probably used to mark the tombs of very important people. When someone would walk through the corridor, all these creepy little statues would stare back at them. There were likely many more statues when the city was prosperous over 1,000 years ago, but now there are only about 20 left. At its height, the Chan Chan Archaeological Site probably boasted at least 30,000 inhabitants. The city center is about 2.3 square miles. The suburbs are significantly larger. The first foreign eyes to see the city were back in 1532. Most of the city was eventually looted. An archaeological dig in the 16th century even found a doorway made of solid silver that would have been worth about $2 million today. Ghoulish rituals. A new archaeological dig in the south of Spain has revealed some mysterious horrors involving a Neolithic settlement. The archaeological investigation went on for 5 long years. Researchers were able to determine that the Neolithic people living in what is today the town of Cadiz took part in strange ceremonial practices. Evidence shows a woman who had a piece of her skull cut out while she was alive, but then swiftly decapitated. Her skull was then put next to a man who just died and was significantly older than her as some kind of burial treasure. Experts figure this older man must have been of a high social standing in the community. It's strange that they killed the younger woman, though. She could have been his wife or perhaps a servant. The whole situation is morbid and disturbing. Next, an animal was slaughtered, probably a lamb or a goat, and that too was added to the burial. Throw in a few decorated ceramic vases and the ritual was over. It took place somewhere around 4800 BCE, when a lot of prehistoric people were still living in caves. The mystery here is that the archaeologists can't figure out exactly what was going on with the rituals. They don't know what the point of all the sacrifice was. After all, why does a dead person need the head of a human woman buried alongside them? It's all very shocking and mysterious. Athens' mass grave. In a rather disturbing discovery, the remains of 80 men shackled together at the wrist have been discovered in a mass grave near Athens. These skeletons date back to the 7th century BCE, a time when Athens was being ruled by aristocrats who held great power through land ownership. But Athens was in a position to change, with a new type of government on the horizon, one known as a tyrant. The 80 men found buried together were all aged between 20 and 30. They had each been killed with a single fatal blow to the skull. This means they had probably been executed one at a time, completely helpless. But just who were these men? They were likely part of a failed coup that tried to oust the aristocrats and place an Olympic champion in the seat of power, creating a mega tyrant. The coup failed, these guys got busted, they ended up shackled, executed, and buried. Shipwreck artifacts. Shipwrecks are mysterious enough without being full of creepy artifacts. But a vessel was recently discovered off the coast of England, and scientists can't quite wrap their heads around a collection of mysterious artifacts. Now, Historic England is using high-resolution X-ray scanners to properly analyze the artifacts and see just what these weird things are. Let's back it up to the actual shipwreck. The vessel is known as the Rus Wujik, and it sank off the coast of Kent way back in 1740. At the time, it was filled with trading goods, such as silver coins and metallic thimbles. But underwater archaeologists also discovered that there may have been some smuggling going on. They found coins that had actually been sewn into people's clothing. The best guess is that some ordinary people working on the ship got a little too handsy with the treasure and stitched the coins into their apparel to keep them hidden. But even though archaeologists have identified coins and other artifacts from the wreckage, there are still some objects that they can't identify without using the most advanced X-ray scanners because the objects have become covered in concretions. Or in other words, they've become covered in hard mineral deposits. So we will still have to wait a while before some of the more obscure treasure is identified. Number 5. Colonial Tavern. In North Carolina, archaeologists were examining a colonial tavern from the 18th century. They were shocked to discover that the building had burned down in the 1760s, causing the walls of the structure to collapse. Because of the walls collapsing, the basement of the tavern was sealed like a time capsule. Nobody had entered the space until Dr. Charles Ewan and his team of researchers from East Carolina University stumbled upon it. Beneath the foundations of the Colonial Tavern, the students found evidence that the building had once been used as a brothel. They found smoking pipes, brass taps from wine barrels, and a whole lot of artifacts that had probably belonged to ladies of the evening, such as clothing fasteners and straight pins. They even found an Irish halfpenny dated back to 1766. The consensus had been that the tavern doubled as a brothel, which may have been operating out of the basement. This would explain all the suspicious paraphernalia. If you're wondering how such a discovery can go unmade in the United States until just now, it's because the tavern was only discovered recently thanks to ground-penetrating radar. After the accidental fire burned the tavern/brothel to the ground, it literally got covered up. The scientists had to dig the remains of the building out of the ground, uncovering like some kind of ancient Egyptian tomb. The Govan Stones. The ancient city of Govan, today a part of Glasgow in Scotland, has a long history going back thousands of years. Govan was one of the earliest places that Christianity took hold in Scotland. Back in 870 AD, the Vikings were living just beyond the waters of Ireland. When they began to attack Britain, just a few centuries after the Romans had abandoned their occupation of the island, Govan became a crucial defensive position against the invading hordes. But Govan lost, and was likely settled by the Vikings, at least according to the Govan Stones. The Govan Stones are a collection of massive gravestones, plus one sarcophagus. There are 31 recumbent gravestones still remaining, each one weighing half a ton. There were more, but they were destroyed during a demolition in the 1980s. One was found in 2019 by a young schoolboy during a trip for his school's archaeology program. But what were these stones? And what do they have to do with the Vikings? They were probably used to show off the power and wealth of the rulers of a lost kingdom that occupied Govan, known as the Kingdom of Strathclyde. These stones are intricately carved with Norse designs, but truly fascinating is that these types of stones have been found in other places throughout Great Britain. They are obviously connected to the Scandinavians, though not a single stone like this has ever been found in Scandinavia, the home of the Vikings. The mystery is why the stones were made at all, and why the artwork is so unique to Britain. It could be that the Vikings had a significant impact on the islanders' way of life. Pyramid energy. According to a new study done by Russian and German scientists, the Khufu Pyramid at Giza is able to produce electromagnetic energy with some of its internal chambers. This is a pretty out-to-lunch study, but apparently when the chambers inside the pyramid are hit with radio waves, they produce energy. Scientists analyzed how the energy is focused inside of the chambers, reaching a conclusion that the Great Pyramid reacts to certain types of energy waves. However, there was no conclusion as to what the energy could have been used for. Scientists don't actually understand how this is happening. Certain radio waves seem to excite the inside of the pyramid, creating a surge of electromagnetic energy near its point. But we can't possibly hope to understand what this means or what it was used for thousands of years ago. For all we know, there could be a different type of radio wave that forces the pyramid to react in a way that we can't even imagine. Neanderthal bodies. Archaeologists recently discovered the very creepy ancient remains of 9 Neanderthals near Rome, according to Italy's Culture Ministry. The oldest of the bodies dates back to between 90,000 and 100,000 years old. The bodies were uncovered inside a prehistoric cave. However, you can hardly call them bodies. They were more like fossilized bones. Scientists found fragments of skull and shattered jawbones, and they say the remains belong to 7 men, 1 woman, and 1 child. But here's the creepy part of the discovery. According to Mario Rolfo, a professor of archaeology working closely with the excavations, the Neanderthals had probably not been living in the cave. On the contrary, they had probably been killed by wild hyenas and then dragged back to the cave, which the hyenas actually lived in, before being eaten as dog food. Back when Neanderthals were still pitiful cave people, they had a bit of a harder time defending themselves against prowling animals, and hyenas were especially keen on hunting down ancient humans and eating them. Specifically, they would hunt infants and elderly people, or even those who were sick. Ancient DNA. Ancient DNA evidence has revealed the origin of the first Bronze Age civilizations to become dominant in Europe. Experts have taken skeletons from different archaeological sites around the Aegean Sea and mapped their genomes. This is only possible due to technological advances of recent years, and the results are shocking. What they discovered is that the first civilizations to truly rise to power in Europe, including the Minoans of Crete, the Cycladic civilization of the Cyclades, and the Helladic civilization from mainland Greece, were very similar genetically speaking. This is despite having significant differences with burial customs, art, and architecture. But what exactly does this mean? One powerful group must have come before them. Researchers say a migration wave of herders from the eastern steppes slowly made their way into what is modern-day Greece and then spread out, creating civilizations of their own. Even though all these different cultures would eventually grow to form their own views, politics, and architectural styles, they still came from the same group of migrants moving from Eurasia into Europe 5,000 years ago. The Dino Impact. Recent fossil evidence has been discovered at the Tanis site in North Dakota containing evidence of the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs. 66 million years ago, an asteroid hit the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, global devastation ensued, and we had the 5th mass extinction on Earth. Basically, everything died. The Tanis site in North Dakota has been found to contain material that came from the impact event that killed the dinosaurs. Embedded in the rock, archaeologists found ancient plants, preserved fish fossils, ancient marine organisms, and even prehistoric mammals. But perhaps more importantly, they also found dinosaur bones and dinosaur eggs. These things are strange to be found together in one single lump. This is the first time that so many random animals have been found inside a small area like this. They were probably grouped together because of the tremors after the impact. The asteroid hitting Mexico caused the oceans to slosh like water in a tub, and these sloshing water propelled sea creatures far inland, where they landed on dry land and died alongside dinosaurs. Most of the fossils found here had likely perished in the minutes or hours immediately following the impact. Spiderweb masks. The traditional masks made from the indigenous people of Malekula are strange, creepy, and very cool. Malekula is the 2nd largest island of Vanuatu, which itself is an island nation deep in the South Pacific Ocean. The island was left pretty much alone for most of the colonial expansion that took place before the 20th century. This allowed the indigenous people here to preserve a lot of their traditions. One of their traditions was making cloth out of spider webs, specifically cloth from the golden silk orb weaver. The tribespeople would go to the forest and collect raw webs until they had enough that they could mold them into bizarre masks. These masks would often have scary, almost demonic faces painted on them. They would sometimes be equipped with boar tusks, and sometimes clay was added to make the faces even more frightening. There are not many of these masks left today. Some have been retrieved from the island and brought to various museums around the world. But what's really shocking is that scientists can't quite figure out what the masks were used for. Some experts have called them suffocating hoods. Early visitors to the South Pacific Islands believed that the masks were used to kill widows at the funerals of their husbands. They would put the mask on, which, because of the way it was made, would suffocate them. This was probably not the case though, because the Malakulan society is still so isolated, it's not like anybody can just go ask. Scientists believe the masks do serve a ceremonial function, they just don't know what it is. Vampire skeleton. In Bulgaria, archaeologists excavated a vampire. That's right, a real and very dead vampire. It was discovered by Professor Nikolai Ovcharov while digging through the remains of the old Thracian city. The skeleton of the vampire was found with a stake stabbed through its chest right where its heart would have been. Perhaps even more shocking than an archaeologist finding the remains of a vampire is that it's not even that uncommon. Well, at least not in Bulgaria. So, did this guy actually suck blood when he was alive? The answer is probably not. The man was instead the victim of an anti-vampire ritual to keep him from ever rising from the dead. He may not have even been a vampire, but those around him definitely thought he was. They pierced his body using an iron rod and even removed his legs from below the knee and then left them sitting by his torso. This happened sometime in the 13th century, with the man being between 40 and 50 years old when he died. Life in those times would have been particularly harsh, with disease all over the place and the thought of death surrounding people. If you lived during the Middle Ages, what do you think you would have done with your life? Would you have become a knight? Or tried to gain the favor of the king and be his advisor? Or maybe become a monk? Tell me what you'd do in the comments below. Then remember to subscribe to Titanic if you haven't already for more intense content just like this. Ancient chalice. Archaeologists have discovered an ancient Christian chalice that may be rewriting the religious history of the United Kingdom. Archaeologists were shocked to discover a chalice that dates back 1,400 years at an old Roman fort in Hexham. The chalice is now the oldest artifact of its kind found in the United Kingdom. It was recovered in fragments from the rubble of the ruined Roman fort, with the director of excavations, Dr. Andrew Bertley, describing it as a very rare find. The chalice was inscribed with angels and crosses and other Christian symbols, but not all of them have been deciphered yet. The reason the chalice is such a strange thing to find in the area is that the Romans had already been long gone when it was made. This suggests that the people in Britain continued Christian worship even after the invading Romans left and took their beliefs with them. Mass moat grave. In the Netherlands, researchers have unearthed a mass grave of what they believe to be medieval skeletons. It all happened when city workers began to excavate a moat. They found the bodies of men between the ages of 15 and 30, all of whom lived near the end of the Middle Ages. Additionally, rusty nails were collected from around the skeletons, suggesting they had been buried inside of boxes. Unfortunately, scientists don't quite understand what this means. The moat being excavated surrounds the famous Botstein Castle. Nobody had thought it would be riddled with corpses. They first found 9 skeletons, but within another few hours had bumped up the total to 20. Archaeologists are now saying there could be even more skeletons all throughout the ancient moat. But here's what makes it a bit creepy. Normally when there are buried bodies, there are grave goods. But in this case, archaeologists haven't found anything of worth. This has pointed to a mass murder. It's quite likely that a large group of people had been killed, stuffed into boxes, and then tossed into the moat to rot. Nobody knows why this happened or who was killed. It's a miracle they even found the bones in the first place. Ancient cereal. In Israel, archaeologists made a very strange discovery, and it wasn't your typical archaeological find. They found the remains of a farmhouse, and you'll never guess what it produced. According to the Israel Antiquities Authority, the farmhouse contained several wine presses used to brew local wines. But it also contained a large silo used for storing grains. That grain was used for making cereal. Not Frosted Flakes, but something close to modern-day shredded wheat, to be honest. Next time you sit down for a bowl of oatmeal or Wheaties, remember that they were making it even before the invention of Christianity. This farmhouse was making cereal 2,800 years ago, which is 800 years before Jesus. Perhaps he himself ate cereal while he was wandering around ancient Judea preaching to his followers. It just goes to show you, cereal has been around for millennia and is still going strong. Lost Islands. Some new archaeological evidence has been found in regard to an incident that happened about 8,000 years ago. Ancient islands have been discovered submerged underneath the North Sea, with researchers believing they initially survived the devastating Storega tsunami that hit Great Britain and the Netherlands in the year 6200 BCE. The tsunami was caused when part of Norway's continental shelf collapsed underwater. The immense wave was thought to have submerged the Doggerland region connecting England's east coast with the European continent, effectively cutting the UK off from the rest of the world. But new research is switching up the story. Based on submerged sediment samples, scientists are now saying that Doggerland may have survived the tsunami along with the now sunken islands in the area. These places may have been inhabited for thousands of years after, all the way into the Stone Age. Researchers are now thinking that there could have been a land bridge between England and Europe for much longer than previously thought, opening the doors to many new theories about the original inhabitants of Britain. But it also raises questions, like if Doggerland lasted all the way into the Stone Age, what eventually caused it to sink? Anti-witchcraft potion. Angeline Tubbs is also known as the Witch of Saratoga. She was born in the year 1761 inside of a small pub called the Star and Garter Inn, located in Northamptonshire. She left England at the age of 15, moved to America, and began to tell fortunes. Legends say she was followed around by cats and was in fact a very real witch. She also apparently lived to be 104 years old. Now, in the house that Angeline Tubbs was born in, the current owner recently discovered a bottle from the 1800s used as an anti-witchcraft potion. The bottle was found while the owner of the building was doing roof repairs. But what's really strange is that the bottle was probably made sometime in the 1830s, long after the alleged witch had already fled to America. What this suggests is that the people living in Angeline's birthplace were still so scared of witches that they created an anti-witchcraft potion to ward off the evil stain of Angeline's birth. The bottle then sat in the chimney for nearly 200 years, providing supposed protection against evil spells. But what was inside the bottle, you ask? It contained fish hooks, glass, human teeth, and a disgusting, unidentified liquid. Number 1. Scepter of Dagobert. The Scepter of Dagobert was once part of the French crown jewels. The scepter dates back to the 7th century and is considered to be the oldest part of the crown jewels, which of course were the symbols of royal power in the French kingdom between 752 and 1825. The scepter was originally stored in the treasury at the Basilica of Saint-Dié, but it then vanished in 1795 and was never seen again. What do you think happened to it? It's one of the most mysterious artifacts in archaeological history, especially for the French. The name of the scepter actually came from the French king Dagobert I, who ruled from between 629 and 639, just one single decade. The scepter had been crafted by a master goldsmith known as Saint Elegui, but where it is today? Nobody has a clue. The scepter is made of enameled gold, it's about 22 inches long, and it's long gone. There have never been any clues as to who stole the scepter, but even stranger is that after 200 years, it has never turned up in any private collection. Bronze Age tomb. An untouched tomb from the Bronze Age has been discovered in Ireland. And yes, it contains human remains. According to Live Science, the tomb dates back over 3,000 years. It was initially discovered by a workman on a farm. Archaeologists are now saying that the tomb has unusual features and is one of the earliest examples of an ancient burial anywhere in Ireland. The tomb is what scientists call a cyst. It's a type of chamber tomb that consists of an underground structure lined with stone, designed to hold any number of burials before being capped with a large sealing stone. What's really fascinating here is that these burials weren't typically practiced until the Bronze Age, no less than 500 years after this one was made. Right now, archaeologists don't know if this was the original inspiration for the chamber tomb or if it was a total fluke 500 years early. Really crazy is that the tomb could even date back as far as 4,500 years. Nothing has been confirmed yet because the radiocarbon dating analysis is still being done by the lab. This discovery is brand new, so we won't even know who was buried inside the tomb yet. But don't worry, we'll have more information probably in a few more months. Which of these discoveries did you think was the best? Let me know about it in the comments, and thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to get all the latest videos from the channel.